Members, it is the appointed time and we have a quorum. This is the second meeting of the Bills Committee on the BHU bill. We will now continue with the discussion of policy matters. Again, 4 minutes each, questions and answers included. Dr. Wendy Hong. Thank you, Chairman. I would like to take a more macro perspective of our housing policy. Many members have mentioned that we are the freest economy in the world, but actually, in terms of housing, we are quite socialist. More than 45% of our households live in public housing. 30% of them live in public rental housing. That's the highest percentage in any place in the world. We have 866,000 public rental housing units. Very soon, the number will exceed 1 million. That's a very heavy burden on the fiscal budget. Now, the government said that we are using the proceeds from subsidized sales flags to sponsor PRH. But actually, land is required. We are spending public money on land for PRH and subsidized sales flags. And also, we are sponsoring these public housing with public money in terms of rates and stamp duty. Now, we are spending some $40 billion in 2021 on public housing. With the increase in public housing supply, the expenditure has been increasing exponentially. Now, there are more and more people who think that public rental housing is the key to other social security and social welfare items. So I don't think that whether we should increase the number of public rental housing or public housing unlimitedly. We should set a limit. On the other hand, I think eradicating SDU is unrealistic because they have their own position in the market. And there is a sandwich class whose income exceeds the PRH limit. So public housing is not accessible to them. We need to offer them mobility along the housing ladder. Otherwise, they will move downwards along it. Now, we should adjust the ratio of public to private housing from 7:3 to 5:5. Now, I'm pleased to hear that in the future it will be enhanced to 6:4. We should enhance the housing ladder to enhance the ratio of homeowners in the private markets in Hong Kong, and only then can we create a healthy environment. Secretary. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Wendy Hong. We share the same objective with Dr. Wendy Hong. We want to create a healthy housing ladder and encourage upward mobility. Now, for a very long time, the number of our subsidized sales flags as they stopped at 15. Now, when we resume selling of SSH, there were only several thousands of sales flags units for sales. So the middle section of the housing ladder was absent. Now, in the future, besides increase in PRH flags, there will also be more subsidized sales flags for sales. Now, in the next 10 years, we will improve the PRH to subsidized sales flags ratio from 7:3 to 6:4. So with the efforts of this term of the government, when we have shortened the waiting time for PRH allocation to a certain extent, then there will be room for enhancing the supply of subsidized sales flags. And also, we will speed up the turnover of PRH flags. We share the same goal with Dr. Wendy Hong, but in terms of the pace, we need to pay attention to the market situation and adjust it in an orderly manner.
Mr. Tony Zhe. Thank you, Chair. I'll do the follow-up on my questions asked in the first round, as well as the Secretary's reply. Let me stress that the professional body I represent when it comes to the BHU bill, the standards are a bit different from newly built flats. Now, I think you're being pragmatic. This includes the issue of the size of windows, the issue raised by Ms. Sari Lee. Indeed, the standards set out are much more lenient than what it used to be. This is pragmatic. There is a need for SDUs, but we want to phase out the really insufficient, inadequate housing. That doesn't mean that the government has double standards. We should not specify different standards for different types of housing. I want to make this clear from the outset because our priority should be safety and hygiene, covering lighting and ventilation as well. We should elaborate on this point. And the second is we are trying to regulate SDUs. I have to talk about the definition of SDUs. I don't want to have loopholes for people to evade your regulation. Perhaps the administration would care to elaborate on this point. And you have to understand that different bureaus and departments have to take enforcement against inadequate housing and substandard living, such as residential units in industrial buildings and commercial buildings, and also rooftop structures as well. You have to step up your enforcement efforts because the concern is whether you have sufficient housing for sufficient resources for rehousing. You should not overlook the pressure on other enforcement departments. So I just like to make these 2 points. Secretary, I thank Mr. Tony Zhe, who has made a very valid point. The design of the mechanism is to set basic or minimum standards to avoid really substandard housing. People have SDUs in a flat in order to profiteer, but we have to ensure that the minimum standards are met. Take the buildings department as example. When they take enforcement action in commercial or industrial buildings, they have a social work team as well. The Housing Authority has got TH to assist as well. Of course, social work teams can help affected tenants to look for suitable housing in the private sector or to help them to apply for TH. We have a multi-pronged approach with different options for residents that have to move. We will take enforcement action in an orderly manner with regard to the supply of housing in the market and also with regard to the conditions of the building, of the particular building in question. Thank you. Mr. Lam and Kwong, I'd like to follow up on the following issue. Now, under the proposed mechanism, rent will be compensated. This is to ensure that owners will be law-abiding and is also a stick for unscrupulous landlords. But the question is whether tenants are able to recover this compensation. So in future, will you regarded as a rent dispute, that is to ask the Lands Tribunal to address these issues, or will tenants have to resort to the Small Claims Tribunal, or will there be a new mechanism to ensure that tenants can receive compensation they're entitled to? Because this is a very important measure to ensure that people have confidence in your new approach. Ms. Winnie Wong, thank you. Indeed, we have put in place a rent compensation mechanism. When will it be activated? For instance, a flat has already been registered or recognized. It is subsequently found that the unit is not eligible for registration or recognition. The status will be cancelled. And if the tenancy is still in force, the secretary will look at the condition. If the tenancy has to be terminated, a notice will be issued. Once a notice is issued, the inhabitant can then seek compensation from the landlord or owner up to 3 months' rent. This is to be dealt with by the Small Claims Tribunal. We will not set up a separate mechanism to deal with this. Any follow-up? You have to make it clear in your future publicity, because people may think that because it is a tenancy matter, the Lands Tribunal is responsible. If you expect a Small Claims Tribunal to look after this, you have to let people know in your publicity. Thank you. Ms. Doreen Kong. Looking at the bill, I have the feeling that for tenants enter into after Gazetted, then the grace period will not apply. Only tenancies entered into before Gazetted will be able to enjoy that grace period. I don't know whether my understanding is correct. Are you concerned that the supply of SDUs will be affected in the short term? 3 types of professionals can inspect those premises. Will you allow professionals to have access to information such as building plans online, because that will help to save professionals' time, and that has cost implications? It is mentioned in the bill that certain provisions in the Buildings Ordinance will not apply to recognized BHUs. How do you align with the requirements under the DMC? For instance, a unit may be exempted from the Buildings Ordinance, but what about the DMC and also other relevant laws? Secretary, I will take the last 2 questions, and Ms. Wong will talk about the 3-month grace period. Our proposal is that data of recognized BHUs will be uploaded to the website. The address, the plans to indicate the number of BHUs in the flat will be accessible online. Of course, personal data of owners and also tenants will not be uploaded. If a flat has BHUs, DMC is not involved. What if a water meter has to be installed? It can be installed in the common area of the flat, and there are also smart meters by the water supplies department. For instance, in the common corridor of the flat, water meters can be accommodated given their small size. And if there are windows to be opened, and will the DMC be involved, professionals will have to remind owners indeed, owners need help from professionals in this regard. What about the 3-month grace period question? Yes, Ms. Kong's understanding is correct. What are flats eligible for registration? We are talking about SDUs already in existence. We have 110,000 of them. So from the day of Gazetted and the 3 months preceding that date, if a tenancy has been entered into, then the BHU will then be able to enjoy the 36 months grace period. Existing SDUs are entitled to a 36-month grace period. For a new BHUs, they need to acquire recognition status before they can be let. Ms. Sarili, thank you. I've got a few questions. First, I'm concerned about works arising from the registration system. We want to regulate BHUs, and so owners have to register their SDUs. If need be, alterations or rectification has to be done. I'd like to know whether there is any measure to ensure the following. The cost of works is entirely subject to market forces. Maybe not all of them, 110,000 of them, will have to carry out rectification works. But then there is bound to be a great demand for such projects. We understand that the supply of construction workers and renovation workers is tight. I'd like to see whether you have measured to ensure that the alteration costs will not be driven up too much. There will be tens of thousands of SDUs to be rectified. In my district, I've heard that some owners have already informed tenants that their tenancies will not be renewed. As a result, supply will be affected. I'd like to know whether you have any policy measure to support tenants that are going to be affected because their tenancies are not renewed. Do we have social workers to help? Lastly, I'd like to talk about the rent. Of course, we want rent control, but there are people who are worried that rents will go up because of the extra costs involved. When we have regular reviews of the rent of BHUs, we do understand that we have a free market in Hong Kong, but if there are unreasonable situations in the free market, what measures will the government have to address the problem? Secretary, I thank Ms. Sarili for the question. In putting together the bill, we have met with a number of organizations. Now, we have met in particular the Contractors Association with painters and also carpenters, etc. We do understand that with BHUs coming into the market, a lot of alteration is required, and the associations will have to explain to various trades, and we have to ensure that owners have the right persons to help if they need alterations. I've met with the contractors associations and also met with representatives of real estate agencies. Real estate agents are frontliners when it comes to meeting with owners, and when owners need help, we can mobilize and strengthen this network to help. I thank Ms. Sarili for her views. We will continue to liaise with these relevant associations. Social workers teams, we have enhanced our resources to help BHUs or SDUs. it is important to take care of the individual needs of tenants, because in implementing LPH and TH, we came to aware that all cases were different and many tenants require one-on-one help. As regards to rent, we do have data. With the enactment of the SDU tenancy legislation, we have kept in view the trend of rents in different regions, covering Hong Kong Island, Kowloon, and the NT. So we do keep track of the trends of rent of SDUs. We will see whether there are situations where the administration has to take care of, and we will see what further measures can be taken to help those in need. Ms. Sarili, thank you. I thank the Secretary for her very positive response. My view is you should keep in view very closely these three issues. They may not be covered in the current bill, but massive renovation works may create difficulties for owners when it comes to getting recognition. And during the renovation period, some tenants may not get their tenancies renewed. I hope we can continue to use our resources. Those who are involved in LHT and also TH, I hope social workers can also help. The Secretary has already undertaken to keep track of the rent of BHUs. We don't want it to rise substantially, and I believe that may not happen, but still we want to have a mechanism to monitor the trends of rent, and there should be regular reviews to ensure that the market can operate in a normal manner. Secretary, for your information, for the LTH in Yau Pok Road, Yuen Long, half of the tenants are actually former SDU inhabitants. So when a large number of SDU tenants have seen their living condition improved, that will also address the supply and demand situation in the SDU market. But I agree that we should closely monitor the situation. I'd like to ask members whether there are further questions on the policy aspect of the bill. If not, we can start a clause-by-clause scrutiny. I'd like to remind members that we will use the blue bill as well as a marked-up copy to help our scrutiny, and also a letter issued by the legal advisor. These will be materials to help us in our clause-by-clause scrutiny. If there are no questions, we will start our clause-by-clause scrutiny. I'd like to know which member from the administration will lead us. Mr. Chen. All right. All right, we will start with the long title. If members do not mind, we will stick to the Chinese text, and our legal advisor will help it with the English text. Thank you. Mr. Chen. Thank you, Chair. Let me introduce the bill to you. There are 11 parts, 96 sections, and 4 schedules in the bill. The first is the long title, and then the preliminary and restriction on subdivided units, and 3 grace period, and Part 4 recognition of subdivided units, Part 5 transitional arrangements relating grace period registration applications and public housing unit recognition applications, covering the countdown period, termination of domestic tenancies for not yet recognized subdivided units in registered flats when countdown periods, and also the offense, Part 6, ancillary or incidental powers, and Part 7, statutory compensation for termination of tenancies, and Part 8, appeals, Part 9, implications on other ordinances, Part 10, miscellaneous, and Part 11, related amendments. The 4 schedules will set out the minimum standards and fees to be charged by the administration, specified professionals, and excluded premises. I will now go through the bill clause by clause.
All right, any questions on the structure of the bill as a whole? If not, let's move on. Thank you, Chair. First, on the long title, a bill is to introduce a regulatory regime for the letting of subdivided units, domestic buildings, or of the domestic parts of composite buildings, to make related amendments to certain enactments and to provide for related matters. Any question on the long title? No? Please move on. Part 1, Article 1, short title and commencement. This ordinance may be cited as the Basic Housing Units Ordinance. Bracket 2, subject to subsection 3, this ordinance comes into operation on the 1st of March 2026. Bracket 3, Part 2 comes into operation on the 1st of March 2027. Part 2 relates to restriction on letting subdivided units. And bracket 4, the Secretary for Housing may, by notice published in the Gazette, postpone the date specified in subsection 3. All right. Any question? Mr. Tony Tse. Thank you, Chair. Would the administration perhaps explain about subsection 4, the rationale behind this? Why is it that the Secretary for Housing may postpone the date specified in subsection 3? Isn't it already very clear? Or perhaps you could let us know what are the rationale behind. Ms. Wong? Thank you, Chair. On subsection 4 is related to Part 2, which is about illegal letting of subdivided units. Subsection 4 only provides flexibility for the legislation. That is, after the expiry of the registration period, on the 1st of March 2027, we will exercise enforcement action on the illegal or substandard SDUs. If in the future there is a need to postpone the date, we will explain the case to the legislative members and let members know why there is such a need. Yes, I agree, Chair, that there may be flexibility provided if we have such a subsection here. But does the administration have any actual ground for having the need of this subsection? Otherwise, I think it is being overcautious. Yes, hypothetically speaking, for instance, after the implementation or after the regulation is in effect, we hope that after a year, the 110,000 SDU owners and tenants would fully understand the regulation. But we will also take into consideration the actual situation. If there are owners or tenants who are still in doubt or they are not sure about the regulation, then the government could provide more time for all parties to adapt to the new situation. And in that is the case, we would need subsection 4 here to provide flexibility to the administration. Well, that said, we still hope that by 1st of March 2027, we will have this regulation put in place. Well, Chair, I think the most important thing is not to let people have the impression that the administration has already considered having the need to postpone for a year the implementation of this ordinance. Secretary General, I think if you're going to if the Secretary has to exercise this power, the Secretary will have to come up to the LegCo to explain the case. Well, if there's no further question, let's move on to 2. Interpretation. Pages are C. Let's start with C3439 in the English version first. Thank you, Chair. Clause 2, interpretation. There are 55 terms for under interpretation. First, about appeal board. That is means a board appointed under subsection 54 bracket 1. Appeal panel means the panel appointed under section 48 bracket 1. And chair is to be appointed by the CE, and then the chair will form an appeal panel. The appeal mechanism will be discussed in further detail. And the second term is about common parts. It means the meaning given by Section 2 of the Building Management Ordinance Cap 344, which includes the corridor, and so forth. These are the common parts that are not used by only one homeowner or one landlord. Third, subdivided units. We have to take reference from Clause 4. We will discuss that in further detail later. Next, principal building. That is, in relation to a subdivided unit, means the flat in which the subdivided unit is located. Principal building, it means the subdivided unit or flat means the building in which the subdivided unit or flat is located. Let, which means letting out the units or subletting. Well, it includes sublet. It also includes the principal tenants letting out of the flat. Next, it's about a gazetted date. It's the date that is on which this ordinance is published in the Gazette. Address is the subdivided unit includes a description that identifies the subdivided unit among all the subdivided units in its principal flat. Validity period. It's about the need to have the basic subset settled. It means after the expiry of the registration period, if there are applications that are still pending, we will regard this application as, or the relevant flat as being registered. Next, validity period. In relation to basic housing unit recognition, it means if the recognition is one given under section 16 bracket 1, means that the period mentioned in section 16 bracket 2, that is 5 years, or if the recognition is one renewed under section 16 bracket 3, means this period mentioned in section 16 period bracket 4, that is also 5 years. Next, domestic tenancy. In relation to any premises or part of any premises of a building, means a tenancy for the letting of the premises or part of it for habitation. I'd like to draw members' attention to the aim of the ordinance, that is to regulate the letting or the tenancy agreement for habitation. For the tenancy that are not for habitation, these will not be regulated by the present regulation. Well, when we are going through clause 7, we will talk about how we're going to decide whether a certain unit is letting for habitation or not. Please pause for a while. All right, on page 3428, Chinese version. Any questions? I understand that Ms. Kong has pressed the button. Ms. Doreen Kong. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask about principal flat. It refers to the building in which the subdivided unit or flat is located. Well, there might be Block 1 and Block 2 for the same building. We're talking about the specific block if there are different blocks under the same building with one name. And second, about the definition of tenancy agreement. If there are some tenancy agreements that do not specify the use, sometimes they may just say that this is for stock keeping only. Well, Ms. Wong, first question about principal flat. Ms. Kong's definition is correct. It means the specific block in the building. Second, about the domestic tenancy. We will, according to the evidence, to decide whether it is a domestic tenancy. If on the tenancy agreement it states that this is for storage purpose, we will actually conduct site visits and decide whether that is the truth. If no further questions, let's move on to C3430, Chinese text. All right, the next term is on secretary. It means the secretary for housing. Next, minimum standards of living conditions. We have to draw reference from subsection 2. Well, let's refer to 3440, page 3440. For purpose of this ordinance, a subdivided unit meets the minimum standards of living conditions if the subdivided unit meets all the requirements specified in Schedule 1 that are applicable to the subdivided unit, and B, it also meets all requirements specified in that schedule that are applicable to the flat. Let's also look at Schedule 1C 3620, page 3620. Schedule 1. It's about the minimum requirements. Setting out the minimum requirements on the 8 areas. We will, according to Clause 84, delineate in further details about these 8 areas. I will perhaps first talk about these 8 areas under Section 1. First, it's minimum internal area. Well, the internal floor area must be at least 8 square meters. And second, minimum height, that is, the unit must have a height of at least 2.3 meters measured from floor to ceiling. And if there is a beam in the subdivided unit, the area beneath must have a height of at least 2 meters. Third is fire safety. That is, the subdivided unit must be so designed and constructed so that in case of fire, the spread of fire and within the flat and from the flat outward can be inhibited, and adequate resistance to the spread of fire and smoke within the flat and from the flat outward is provided. And there should be adequate means of escape for safe evacuation. Also, stability of a flat can be maintained to allow adequate time for safe evacuation, for rescue and firefighting operation, and avoid any consequential damage. Part 4 is loading. The subdivided unit and its principal flat must not be subject to a load beyond each of their proper bearing capacity. 5, it's on separate toilet. It means that there must be an enclosed and waterproofed toilet in the unit for exclusive use by its occupier, and the toilet must be fitted with a water closet, a lavatory basin, and a bath or shower. 6, water supply point and sink outside toilet, which means a water supply point and a sink must be provided outside the toilet of the subdivided unit, and the area around the water supply point and sink must be waterproofed. 7, lighting and ventilation. Every room in the subdivided unit must comply with regulations 30, 31, 32, and 33 of Cap 123F, or be fitted with at least one openable window. and so forth. At least there must be one openable window that has a superficial area of glass of at least 0.1 square meter and must provide adequate access to the external air. There also has to be fitted with artificial lighting and a mechanical means of ventilation that is capable of supplying fresh air, at least at the rate of 5 changes of air per hour. And if it is a toilet without window, there should be a kind of mechanism for supplying of fresh air and also lighting. And lastly, water and electricity meters. It means that the unit must be provided with a water meter provided by the Water Supplies Department exclusively, and an electricity meter provided by Hong Kong Electric Company and CLP Power exclusively for the subdivided unit. All right, let's pause here. There are quite a lot of content here. I understand that 3 members have pressed the button. First, Mr. Tony Sam. Thank you, Chair. Well, in Schedule 1, there are a lot of minimum standards and requirements. I think this is very important, especially for recognition of the subdivided flats. And also, the professional people have to, according to these requirements, decide on whether a certain unit is up to standard. Chairman, please allow us more time to go into further detail. I think we need to spend some more time to raise questions. My first question is on number 1, minimum internal floor area, IFA. Many years ago, I remember that we spent a lot of time discussing about the requirement for IFA. There are sellable area and also construction areas and so forth. In our surveyors association, we also have discussed this issue. I hope the administration could explain in further detail whether there are definition of the IFA. Right. Okay. Ms. Wong, about IFA, we're talking about the internal floor area. That is within the unit. It is different from construction area. You're talking about internal floor area. Please look at Schedule 1, number 1, minimum IFA. Yes. Under the ordinance, there is a definition of the IFA. In the future, we will set out in further details in our operation manual. That is how these IFA is to be measured. That is the area measured from wall to wall within the unit. That is what we meant by internal floor area. In the future, we will set out these detailed measurement, how we're going to measure the IFA in the future operation manuals. Yes, I'm sure that the administration has put in a lot of thought in this requirement about IFA. Well, in the past, we had different definitions about IFA. I think it's very important that the administration should have a clear definition of the term now. Well, for instance, if there is a beam within a unit, how is the IFA going to be measured? Well, what sort of standards should the professionals follow or adhere to? I hope that you can come up with a detailed operation manual with detailed definition of these terms and requirements in the ASAP. They do need this kind of information. Thank you. Yes, we do understand.
Thank you, Chairman. We are now formulating the practical guidelines together with the professional institutes. We have heard the members' views. We will keep in close touch with those professional bodies so that the industry understands clearly how the measurement is to be done. Mr. Rin Kong. Thank you, Chairman. My question is on 2 definitions read out just now. First, statutory orders, notices, and directions. Now, there are 5 types of... Sorry, Mr. Rin Kong, we haven't reached there yet. We were just at the minimum living standard of living conditions. So we are now at Schedule 1. Mr. Vincent Zhang. Thank you. On Schedule 1, there is a requirement for the separate toilet. So it should be 2 meters square or 2 meters in height. Now, sometimes there is a floor screeding on the toilet's floor, so the height would be reduced. So does that count? And also, what's the fire safety requirements for the wall themselves? Now, about floor screeding in toilets. Will the minimum height be adjusted according to the height of the screeding? Now, that refers to requirements 2, minimum height in the schedule. So even with a floor screeding, there must still be a height of at least 2.3 meters. Now, in terms of wall with resistance to the spread of fire and smoke, we will specify clearly in the practice guidelines that whether the smoke screen or the wall has to be able to withstand fire or smoke for at least an hour. We are just laying out the guiding principles in the schedule. There may be newer products and adjustments to fire safety requirements in the future. So those will be specified in the practice guidelines in the future. Now, about resistance to fire for an hour, we mentioned that in the proposal to the panel, but we are not repeating that in the bill. We're just laying down the principle. Now, as I understand, there must be a fire extinguisher in the common parts of the flat. So the fire extinguisher must be placed somewhere in the common part, but also there is a corridor. So will the area for placing the fire extinguisher be exempted from the from the corridor? Now, requirements 3, brackets 4, we don't need a fire extinguisher in each of the BHU. However, there must be a fire extinguisher in the common parts of the flat. Now, the fire extinguisher can be very small in size. There should be no problem placing the fire extinguisher in the corridor. Ms. Jovi Chen. Thank you, Chairman. Now, definition, it refers us to C3340 and then to Schedule 1. Now, Schedule 1 are the minimum standards of living conditions. Now, Part 4, Schedule 2, specifies the excluded premises. So should it be explained? Should Schedule 4 or should Part 4 also be referred to in the definition? Ms. Wong? Now, we have been scrutinizing the definitions one by one. So for minimum living standards or minimum standards of living conditions, we have come to Schedule 1. But subsequently, in the definition, there will be references to Schedules 2 to 4 as well. Ms. Chen, yes, I know we will go through the schedules one by one, but will you specify clearly in the definition that what are not included by the BHU regime? Ms. Wong or Mr. Chen? Thank you. Concerning premises that the BHU regime is not applicable to, actually, we have specified that in a section in the bill. It mentioned that the excluded premises are referred to in Schedule 4. So we have deals with the reference to premises that is not applicable in the introduction. Mr. Andrew Lam, thank you. Definition, principal flags. Now the definition is in relation to a subdivided unit. It means the flags in which the subdivided unit is located. So we will touch upon a lot of areas concerning building plans. So there are situations where there are unauthorized building works attached to the recognized BHU. But as far as I understand, this bill does not deal with those UBWs. So by this term, principal flags, does it exclude the UBWs? Let's say there are 3 independent enclosed subdivided units, but there is an unauthorized building works outside the principal flags. So that UBW will not be part of the principal flag. But if it is attached to one of the subdivided units as a part of it, how do we understand the term? Mr. Chen, thank you. The question is about the definition of principal flag. This is mainly for the purpose of registration. We accept application for registration of flags as a whole. So if there is one subdivided unit which is eligible for recognition as a BHU, then all the SDUs within the flag would be recognized and then can enjoy the grace period. So the principal flag means the one subdivided unit in the flag which is recognized. If there are UBWs in the flags, then in considering the application for recognition, we would consider whether there are statutory orders issued by the building department which are not complied with. Some follow-up questions. Now, if that's the case, inside the flags, if there are statutory orders issued by the building departments, then you will consider it. But what about UBWs outside the flags? For example, UBWs attached to the light well. It's not part of the flag according to the building plan, but you have to go through the subdivided units to reach the UBW. So how will you deal with this case? Ms. Wong? Now, the overarching principle is we require the landlord of the subdivided units to be responsible for the units they lease out. So the subdivided units and the belonging flags must be without any statutory orders issued by the buildings department. If there are UBWs outside of the flag, how would we deal with it? Well, we would consider it case by case. Now, the landlord is applying for recognition of their own flags or units only. It's unreasonable to ask them to deal with the UBWs which exist in the common parts of the building. However, if the UBW poses imminent risk to life or properties, then we will consider it as a factor. Mr. Tony Jay, since we were talking about the internal floor area and the height requirements, then I have some questions. I hope the guideline would be very clear for ceiling height, especially for old building. Parts of the flag may be able to meet the requirements, but other parts may not. So especially when there are beams in the flags, which is very common in older buildings. Those beams are wavy in shape. So we need a very clear set of standards for professionals to consider whether the flag has met the requirements. Another question about loading. The professionals will be required to prove the loading of the flag. Now, do you refer to the loading specified by the building plan? Now, since there are partitions, there is something called the dead load. And also there is live load, which means the habitants in the flag. So how do you calculate loading? Ms. Wong, thank you. We have heard the sector's views on the measurements of ceiling height. Now we will specify the methodologies in the practical guidelines. There are beams or ceilings in different shapes, so we will lay down the guidelines clearly. Now about loading, we will require the professional to confirm that after the modification, the loading has not exceeded the designed loading of the flags. Now the partition walls or floor screening in the flags may not entail a lot of loading. Still, in the future practical guidelines, we will specify how it should be measured. We will model it upon the requirements of the buildings department. So the professionals should already be very clear about how this works. We will not create a separate standard. Can I follow up on the question about waterproofing of separate toilets as well? Now, waterproofing, I think there will be guidelines on what constitutes waterproofing. There must be a standard. Schedule 1 should be the standard, but the standard here is not very clear. You always fall back on the guidelines, but we hope that the guideline will be available earlier. Otherwise, we will have no standard to follow. Now, waterproofing, please shed some light on the term. Ms. Wong. On waterproof, in the meetings with the panel on housing, we have explained what waterproofing means. For example, water supply points and also the floor screening underneath the sink. At the level of 1.1 meter above ground, there must be waterproofing measures. So we have specified all these in the paper. We are just laying down the broad principles in Schedule 1. Now, for pre-existing SDU, we will rely on the visual confirmation of the professionals on whether there is water seepage. However, for new BHU, they will have to fulfill the requirements of 1.1 of waterproofing for at 1.1 meter above ground. Just very briefly, Chairman. Now, as you mentioned, visual confirmation by professionals, that's up for interpretation. So will you hold professionals accountable if some incidents happened afterwards? That's the same for ceiling and floor area and waterproofing. You need to be specific. Do you require waterproofing for the entire toilet or just the parts you mentioned? These are all areas where professionals including those that I represent, would be worried about. Now, we require professional audit. We rely on the professional judgments of the professionals. Actually, the liability or the duty of professionals would stop as the audit report submitted to us. Of course, if there are false information on the report, we would follow up on the issue. However, if the measures taken are underwhelming, even after the confirmation of the report, that's not the responsibility of the professionals. Mr. Chen, in terms of waterproofing for the toilets, now there are 110,000 SDUs in existence. Now, according to our survey, some 70% of these flags can meet our requirements. We do not intend to require all pre-existing SDUs to demolish their toilets and rebuild them. That would be too much of a nuisance. So we will require professionals to look at the situation of the toilets and check whether there are water leakage. Tests need to be conducted. If it is confirmed that there is no water seepage or leakage in the toilets, we would consider it having fulfilled our requirement. For newly partitioned flags and toilets, after the passage of the law, they will have to meet the new requirements. You have been speaking for a very long time, but I think the administration has been quite evasive. Now, you may just say that the 70% of the flags are fine. Dr. Wendy Hung, my question is about the standalone fire detector. Requirements 3, 2A, it says the subdivided units in the shared part of the principal flags must each be provided with adequate standalone fire detectors. So if there is a flag with 3 subdivided units and a shared living room, does it mean that there must be 4 standalone fire detectors? If there are 3 subdivided units, but there is not a shared living room, but just a narrow corridor, does it still need 4 standalone fire detectors? Ms. Wong, for every SDU, there must be a fire detector and also the shared space. Now, for narrow corridors or the shared living room mentioned by the member, we believe that a standalone fire detector is also needed. But depending on the design of the detector, the area it can cover are different, so the locations can be flexible. So maybe there will be 1 fire detector in the living room and then another one in the corridor. There must be 1 standalone fire detector in the shared space. If the living room and the corridor is the same space, then just 1, and also 1 for each SDU. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok, thank you. My question is relatively simple. Now, the separate toilets, it says it must be fitted with a water closet, a lavatory basin, and a bath or shower. So that's only natural. And also outside the toilets, there must be a water supply point and a sink. Can you explain what kind of sink you have in mind and why? Are these sinks for cooking purposes? That's why they have to be separated from the toilet. Ms. Wong? Yes, Dr. Lo's understanding is correct. We have this requirement concerning the water supply point outside the toilet. Because we don't require a kitchen in the BHU. However, in many SDU right now, toilets and sinks are in the same space. So from the perspective of hygiene, we require a separate water supply point outside the toilet. It can be a very small sink for the purpose of washing cooking utensils and washing food.
點係好嘅，不過
Well, the starting point is good, but then you have to consider it pragmatically if the IFA is just 8 square meters. So you may as well want to wash your veggie in the sink in the toilet. And if you have a separate water supply point and the sink must be waterproofed, it's not easy to achieve. While this is well-intentioned, it is not practical. This is one of the reasons why members said that the construction cost or renovation cost is going to be high. Ms. Wong. Yes, the location of the sink. There are different products available. The sink can be a very small one with a water supply point and a waterproof layer surrounding it will serve the purpose. Now, the reason why we have this provision is to ensure that the toilet and kitchen will not serve as one, but in the future code of practice, we will provide more guidelines. Mr. Andrew Lam. Thank you. Still on the point of the separate toilet. Now, you said that the toilet must be for exclusive use. Do you mean sufficient toilets for all the units, or must be the toilet self-contained in the subdivided unit? I have no problem with having a waterproofed toilet, but in older buildings, no matter how well the pipes are laid, there are many repair and maintenance problems. So water seepage will not just affect that unit, but the units below that floor. So long as there are sufficient toilets available, can these toilets be placed together so that both drainage and also water supply will be at the same location? Can that be an option? Mr. Chen, thank you. On the question of a separate toilet, it will be counted towards the IFA of the unit. So we talk about a flat being separated into a few units. So the intention is to have a self-contained SDU. So the toilet should be within the SDU for use by the tenants. I don't see any contradiction here. You have a toilet, a separate toilet for a particular unit with a key. Now, let's say the IFA of the unit is 72 square meters and the toilet is 8 square meters. So in total, the IFA is still 8 square meters. Now, we require a separate toilet because many tenants would want a toilet within their own unit. For instance, after taking a shower, it's much better if the toilet is in its own unit. It's better than having a toilet and for its exclusive use in a separate location. So the minimum IFA is 8 square meters. We want the unit to be self-contained. One further consideration is if the separate toilet can be placed outside the SDU, it can create a loophole for operators to place some other facilities outside the SDU and yet count it towards the IFA of the whole unit. So our policy is to require the separate toilet to be within the SDU. And when we consider an application for recognition, we will see whether it is in compliance with our requirements. Mr. Andrew Lam, while I have no strong view on this point, but from the perspective of cost effectiveness and future repair maintenance, please reconsider my suggestion. Thank you. Ms. Judy Chen. Thank you. I'm concerned about point 6 of Schedule 1, and that is a water supply point and sink outside toilet. This is because you don't want one cubicle to serve as both toilet and the kitchen. But you can imagine in an 8 square meter SDU, all the walls have got a furniture placed there. So in future, you require a water supply point and a sink. The sink is not going to be a big one. It may be a triangular one. In fact, it is not really usable for washing my veggies, for instance. This is a very practical point. So will you just require a water supply point? Now, if I'm a housewife, I can just buy a sieve or a bigger plastic basin. I can take it out when I want to use it. Otherwise, it can be stored away so that it would not take up any space on the wall. Please reconsider this point. Thank you. We said a water supply point and a sink should be provided. We have communicated with the buildings department. It would be more appropriate for both to be placed together. While I got Ms. Chan's point, we do understand that space is limited in an 8 square meter SDU. But we've tried out. Our architects have tried to come up with a plan fulfilling the basic requirements and is found to be feasible. When it comes to actual practice, we'll see whether more guidelines can be provided to owners that have to fulfill this requirement. We note this view. The 8 minimum standards are set out in the schedule. If members have very strong views that the minimum standards should be adjusted, we will take stock of the situation after implementation. Why can't you do it the other way around? And that is, you adjust the situation after implementation. Please allow me to think about this and give you a reply later. All right, we will put a marker here. Ms. Sari Lee. My question relates to the petitioning. Are you talking about the size? Yes, the minimum IFA and also the minimum height. The minimum IFA is very strict. It should be at least 8 square meters, and the minimum height should be at least 2.3 meters. And if there is a beam in the subdivided unit, the area beneath the beam must have a height of at least 2 meters, measured from the floor to the underside of the beam. As we all know, the floor is raised in many SDUs. So will you include the raised floor as well? I understand why you require minimum IFA of 8 square meters, because you want to ensure a minimum area of living. But when it comes to the height, why is it so strict? What scientific study have you undertaken? And many floors are raised in SDUs. We have over 110,000 SDUs scattered in different types of buildings. If you are so strict here, some SDUs will not be able to comply with this point because of the height of the floor height of the building itself. And the third point is about fire safety. I do understand that this is a very important point. Now, you say here that there must be so designed and constructed to prevent the spread of the fire within the flat, and there must be adequate resistance to the spread of fire and adequate means of escape. Now, My experience with the FSD is they work very slowly if you require them to approve such design. But then you also say that there must be adequate time for fire evacuation and adequate time for rescue and firefighting and avoid any subsequent damage to any other flats. We all understand what is a SDU, that is, a flat is divided into different units. How can these standards be fulfilled? Mr. Chen, thank you, Mrs. Sarili, for your question. On the minimum height, we have given regard to the requirements of the buildings ordinance. We have adjusted the requirements from 2.5 meters and 2.3 meters to 2.3 to 2 meters respectively. So we have already taken into account that the floor may be raised, because we do understand that SDUs need a raised floor for a laying of pipes and also wires. So we have already made the necessary adjustment. Our consultant visited more than 2,000 SDUs last year. According to information collected, most SDUs will be able to fulfill the 2.3 meter requirement. So Ms. Lee can rest assured we have set these standards having regard to the real situation. As for this fire safety aspect, our principle is to fulfill the current fire safety requirements. We have to follow the wording in the relevant legislation, so it may sound technical, but we talk about the access to no less than 2 staircases. That is really a requirement when the building was first constructed. And if the main door of the flat is kept, if there is a corridor, then it has to be at least 0.75 meters, and the walls do not have any fire resistance requirement. It only has to stop the spread of smoke. So we just want to ensure that the wall is from floor to ceiling, and so that the compartments entirely enclosed, and the wall should be solid in principle. So will the certification by the FSD or the consultants? We have a task force to consider application for recognition. There should be an audit report performed by a professional. The professional will have to cover all these 8 areas of minimum standards. When the audit report is submitted to the housing department or housing bureau, our task force will read those reports. If necessary, we can consult the fire services department as well. In general, we have a task force within the Housing Bureau to consider whether the 8 areas of minimum standards are required. Does that mean that with certification from the task force, there is no need for the FSD to inspect the fire aspects? Ms. Lee, why don't you wait for your next round? Dr. Lo Wai Kwong, I understand that you want to take care of safety and hygiene. But as we all know, in a small unit of 8 square meters, you cannot expect both a separate toilet and a separate kitchen. So you have given up the latter and stick to the former. Since you have dispensed with a kitchen, isn't it impractical to expect a water supply point and a sink? I do cook myself, so I'm considered the chef here, but I, of course, feel that it's not really possible. You may want to be comprehensive and thorough, but this is not practical, because I'm quite sure that they would rather wash their veggies in the toilet instead. They don't want to do it in the water supply point and sink within the unit because they may wet the floor. So I hope you have heard this because members too have very strong views about this. Mr. Tony Zhe, I'm sorry, I might have asked too many questions because the 8 minimum standards are really important. In particular, the professionals I represent here will rely on this schedule for carrying out the audit report. On 6.2, I fully agree with Dr. Wai Kwok and Ms. Jody Chen. But if it is in the bill, professionals have to follow it. I talked about water proving. If you have a water supply point and a sink, maybe the waterproof requirements will be different. And you talked about water testing in a pre-existing SDU. Does that mean that professionals can go to the flat below the SDU flat? Please make this clear for us. When it comes to waterproof arrangement, we expect professionals to inspect the existing SDU, but owners are also required to provide information regarding the flat to the professionals. For instance, if the owner has already received a complaint of a water seepage, then such information should be provided to the professional for compiling the audit report. As for whether professionals should be authorized to visit stories below the flat, that may not be possible. But then the owner is the applicant. No. You talked about water testing, waterproof testing. How do I know whether the toilet is waterproofed? I have to check the story downstairs. If I got you right, you talked about waterproof testing. Well, that is just one of the ways and means to ensure that the toilet is waterproofed. If on inspection the professional truly believes that the SDU is all right, by looking at the conditions, that is already sufficient. But if he already spots like spoiling and a peeling off of paint, then he may have to do more in compiling the audit report. Well, I think the easiest way is to check the unit and the lower story. I'd like to ask a question about 7, lighting and ventilation, an exchange of 5 changes of air per hour. I'd like to know whether, so long as there is such a mechanical means that it's okay. You're correct. Such a device should be installed. Of course, it must be working. I think I already answered the question. Right, back to the waterproof issue. I hope it will be in the guidelines because it talks about the area around the water supply point and sink must be waterproofed. Okay, the area around. That area can vary in size. Please specify in the code of practice. All right, we've already spent more than 45 minutes on this part. I understand that the interpretation section and as well as the schedule are important, but we still have other issues to discuss. Some members have already had 5 rounds of questions, so please be succinct, Mrs. Sari Lee. I will follow up on my previous question. The height. You talked about taking reference from the buildings ordinance. I think it is reasonable if you're talking about a newly built building While you talked about having visited thousands of SDUs, is it really practical to expect a minimum height of 2.3 meters? And the second point is about fire safety. Now, if the industry is satisfied with this and you don't have any extra requirements, I'm okay. But then I'm concerned about asking for the FSD to approve. And then waterproofing. We have numerous cases of water seepage because of SDUs. If after so much alterations and you don't have any waterproof testing, my concern is there will be more water seepage complaints, and also the test using colored dyes is really useless.
My last point is about loading. I'm really worried that if a building is going to be altered time and again, are you talking about loading of individual unit or the entire building? Will it actually worsen the loading situation of the particular building if the units inside is going to be altered time and again? Well, in the area that I work for, there are serious problems regarding this loading problem in existing buildings. Do you have an overall consideration for a loading requirement? Thank you, Chair. Dr. Lee has a number of questions. First, about minimum height requirement. The rationale behind that is to avoid having units that have very low height. So that's why we put in a minimum height requirement for the units. We actually have conducted investigations and believe that 2.3 and 2 meters respectively should be a minimum requirement. Most buildings would be able to comply. Second, about fire safety requirement. Of course, if certain cases are more complex and if our professional team want to seek advice from the fire services department, of course they could do so. Third point about water leakage. Of course, it's we understand that there are water seepage or leakage problem in existing SDUs. That's why we have this requirement here about waterproof requirement for existing units. Well, the professional team would just go in and look at if there are any to see if there are any signs for water leakage. For the new SDUs, because they are newly altered or newly built, they could do according to the latest requirement of the buildings department. Next point about loading. We're talking about the subdivided unit itself, the loading of that unit itself. That is, after alteration or after making the subdivided units, the loading could not exceed the original loading of the unit. For when the entire building, there is a loading limit for the entire building. So if each unit within that building complies with the loading requirement respectively, then the total loading for the building would not exceed the requirement. Well, does it mean that the building department will look at the loading situation? Well, for loading, it would the specified professionals would have to look into it. This is one of the areas that the professional team have to inspect. And in the audit report, it will be clearly stated about the loading situation of the units. Well, of course, we do not need to go through the cases one by one. Next, Mr. Vincent Chang. Yes, we spend so much time on these parts because these are very important indeed. about the minimum requirements. Well, I'd like to follow up on the loading problem and also water seepage problem. As I heard from the administration, you said that there are new materials and for new SDUs, there shouldn't be any problem. For the existing SDUs, you will the administration will find a professional team to do inspection. There are actually, it's quite common that a water leakage problem exists, and especially water leaking into the unit below. So I think you have to really consider this more carefully. Next, about loading. I understand that the loading is for the individual unit, and if each unit complies with the requirement, then the entire building's loading would not be a problem. Well, I heard concern about the cost of water leakage checking. Do you have further details on these 2 points? Thanks, Chair. We are aware of the existing water leakage problems in the SDUs. Well, for existing SDUs, when the professional team goes to check the situation inside, they will, according to their professional knowledge, decide whether there are water leakage problem in the unit. Well, actually, the owners or the landlord has the same responsibility. Well, if there are water leakage problem, the landlord would have received notices from relevant department about the water leakage problem of the unit. For loading, we consulted with the buildings department, and we understand that when the professional team go inside the unit for inspection, they would notice whether there are raised floor or major alterations within the unit. So if each unit complies with the loading requirement, then the entire building will not be in danger. Next, Deputy Chair. Thank you, Chairman. Regarding these 8 minimum requirements, many colleagues have expressed their views and concerns. And we heard a lot of views about the water supply point and sink outside toilet. Well, I also have some concern about real usage of these facilities. When I visited the SDUs, I understand that many of them would not cook inside their units. We also have community living rooms in which cooking facilities are provided. So I really think that a separate or a water supply point or sink outside toilet is really not necessary. I understand. I would like to know why you think this is necessary. For water and electricity meters, I am in support of it. We know that the administration is concerned about illegal use of water or electricity. I'd like to know whether there are follow-up action to ensure that the meters are in place. Yes, about water supply point, we've heard members' view. We will take back your points to consider further. For water and electricity meters, we have consulted with the 2 electricity company, and they understand that we would have the requirement of water meter and electricity meter inside each subdivided unit. They would ensure that this will be done, and they are actually ready for that. Mr. Lam Kong. Thank you, Chair. I heard the administration's response about water supply point, and I also agree that the administration should reconsider this after hearing our members' views. Well, my question is about water and electricity meters. It says here that the meters exclusively for the subdivided unit should be provided. Well, the administration mentioned that they have consulted with the 2 electricity companies. But it says here that the meter has to be provided exclusively for the subdivided unit by the company, by the electricity company. Can you tell me more about the definition of this term here, provided by the company exclusively for the unit? We have over 110,000 SDUs, but there will be heavy workload for the electricity company. If it is stated in the legislation, I'm concerned whether the electricity company could have enough manpower to install the meters in the units. Can they perhaps just provide the material? In other words, the subcontractors or could just buy these materials or buy the meter from the electricity companies so that they could do the installation works as soon as possible. Would that meet your requirement if they do it that way? Ms. Wang? Yes. The rationale for providing this requirement is to ensure that water and electricity meters are in place exclusively for the subdivided unit. This is to avoid the abuse of the existing situation by the landlord. Well, we are worried that if the meters could be bought by the landlord anywhere in the market, it might not be up to our standard, and this might not provide accurate reading of the water or electricity used. That's why we have a provision here stating that these individual or separate meters have to be provided by the Water Supplies Department and the 2 electricity companies respectively. This is to avoid future abuse. Members could rest assured that the companies have consulted thoroughly, we have consulted them thoroughly, and they are ready to that this work could be done. Yes, I know that you have consulted with them, and they responded positively. However, I'm really worried whether they have enough manpower, because there are so many SDUs in the market, and if the legislation is in place, all of these SDUs have to have these meters installed. I just wonder if you have any flexibility provided here. Yes, talking about the timetable, well, we mentioned that by 1st of March 2026, registration will start, and for the 1100,000 SDUs, they have about 4 years grace period to do alteration, and I believe that not all of them will start the alteration works in the same period of time. We have enough length for the grace period, and I believe that these works would be spread out during the period. Next, Mr. Andrew Lam. Yes, I'd like to make a point of supplement. I'm not in opposition to your provision here. I just hope that you would, in advance, talk clearly with the 2 electricity companies. If you ask them to install these meters, well, of course, we are confident that they would provide up to standard meters. However, there might be some buildings that they will be refused access into. They might not be allowed to enter certain premises, and that could perhaps drag your work progress. Secretary General. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Lam. Regarding electricity meters, well, starting from the start of the working group in 2023, we have heard views on this point, and we understand that this is important. That is exactly why we have been in close consultation with the 2 electricity, and so far their response is that they are confident and they are capable of meeting with our requirement to install their separate meters in various SDUs. Thank you. Now we have gone through Schedule 1, and members have raised their questions or comments about these minimum requirements under Schedule 1. If we do not have further questions, I suggest that we pass Schedule 1. Any further questions on Schedule 1? Mr. Tony Se? Anyone else who would like to speak more or speak further on Schedule 1? Well, members have raised views. All of them are very important and valid. Shall we perhaps wait for the administration to bring these views back and reconsider them further before we decide on whether we could pass the content of Schedule 1? Yes, what I meant was that we have finished vetting Schedule 1. Yes, I agree that we have finished vetting Schedule 1, but we have raised certain questions and comments. I think we should leave some time for the administration to bring these views back and reconsider them first. Yes, all right. Mr. Starley, I hope that in the next meeting the administration could answer our questions, especially on the water leakage problem. Any further questions on Schedule 1? If not, we have completed vetting Schedule 1. Let's go back to C3430, Chinese version. All right, thank you. The next term is on court. A court means a court defined as by Section 3 of the Interpretation General Clauses Ordinance, Cap 1, or a magistrate. Well, it includes a court of final appeal, high court, and so forth. That's defined by Section 3. Next term is building works. It's given by Section 2, bracket 1 of Cap 123. In short, it means all the building works, the the site formation works, and so forth. The next term is building authority. The meaning is given by Section 2, bracket 1 of Cap 123. Next one is building. It's referred to a building or any other structure constructed or adapted for use in accordance with an approved building plan. Next one is specified application. It means specified application means grace period registration application, basic housing unit application, or basic housing unit renewal application. And specified statutory order, notice, or direction. It means building-related orders or notice, fire safety-related order or direction, improvement notice, specified by the gas safety ordinance or waterworks ordinance or the electricity ordinance. Please pause here. For page C3430 to 3432, first part, any questions? If not, please continue. Thank you. Next, specified form and way. It means the notice or that should be submitted, and specified profession is set out by Schedule 3. Prescribed fees, it's about the fees specified. Let's move on to 3628 to go through Schedule 2 and 3. All right, let's pause here. Let's turn to Schedule 2 first. That is page C3628 in the Chinese version. Yes, 3628, Chinese version.
We have now come to Schedule 2. Mr. Chen, Schedule 2 sets out the prescribed fees for new applications under the BHU regime. That includes grace period registration application, BHU recognition application, and BHU renewal application. Now, as per our policy discussion, in the first 3 years of the BHU regime, we will provide an early bird discount. That is, if application is made in the first half year after the regime, there will be a waiver for 3 years, and only in the 4th year must the applicants pay the full fee. Now, for those who submit an application in the first year, they can enjoy a 2-year waiver and a half waiver, $105,000 in the third year, and full fee in the 4th year. For other application for recognition of new BHU, they can enjoy full waiver in the first year, and then half fee as the 2nd and 3rd year, and the full 3,000 years in the 4th year. Now let's go through the fees one by one in Schedule 2. Item 1 in Schedule 2, grace period registration application. If the application is made during the period beginning on the 1st of March 2026 and ending on the 28th of February 2027, that is within the first 12 months, no fee will be charged for the registration. 1B, if the grace period registration application period is extended, then we will charge the full fee of $745 per flat. Mr. Andrew Lam. Now my question is on the application for a renewal, so I will wait until we have come to that. So item 1AB, any questions? If not, item 2. Thank you. Basic housing unit recognition application. If the grace period registration is in force for the principal flats of the subdivided units concerned, then the flats can enjoy a waiver for the first 3 years, and only in the 4th year must the landlord pay the full $3,000 registration fee. Item B. If the grace period registration is in force for the principal flats, that means if the application is made during the 7 to the 12 months of the regime, then there will be a full waiver in the first 2 years. 3rd year, $1,500 half fee, and the 4th year, $3,000 full fee. Any questions? Please continue. C. For units which are ineligible for registration, then they can enjoy the waiver for recognition in the first year, and half fee for the 2nd and 3rd year, and the full $3,000 fee in the 4th year. Please continue. Finally, item 3, BHU renewal application. So upon the expiry of the 5-year validity period, if the landlord wishes to continue operating the BHU, then a fee of $2,400 per BHU is required for renewal. Mr. Lam. So that refers to each of the BHU but not the principal flats. Now, but going back to the definition, renewal date, there is the word "and" in the clause. So according to my understanding, you are not targeting each of the BHU but the flat as a whole. That means all the BHU in the flat must be up to standard before you allow a renewal. Ms. Wong, we offer recognition on each of the BHU separately. So let's say if the flag is 400 square feet in size and it is divided into 4 100 square feet BHQs. So the 4 BHQs will have to be altered individually. Let's say if flag A involves simpler procedures and the alteration works has been completed sooner, then flag A will be recognized first. So that depends, the renewal will depends on the expiry date of the validity period for each of the BHUs. Now we go back to page 3440. Validity period. So my question is mainly on the word "and". So you will consider each SDU to see whether they fulfill the requirements under Schedule 1. So as long as the flag is free from encumbrances, so there are no statutory orders and other encumbrances, then the landlord can modify, register, and have each of the BHUs recognized on their own instead of applying for recognition as a lot. So we have completed scrutinizing Schedule 2. Let's go back to page C3432. Tenancy. Pardon me, Chairman. Since we have mentioned professionals, specified professionals, I propose we scrutinize Schedule 3 as well. 3634. Yes, please. Thank you. Simply put, Schedule 3 specifies the specified professionals who are eligible for conducting an audit on whether the BHUs fulfill these standards. So they are professional architects, professional engineers who are under the building services, civil, fire, or structural discipline, and also registered surveyors. So item 1, a person whose name is on the register of registered architects mentioned in section 8A of the Architects Registration Ordinance, Cap 408. 2, a person whose name is on the register of registered professional engineers mentioned in section 7A of the Engineers Registration Ordinance, Cap 409, under the building services, civil, fire, or structural discipline. 3, a person whose name is on the register of registered professional surveyors mentioned in section 7A of the Surveyors Registration Ordinance, Cap 417, under the Building Surveying Division. So there are 2 members. Mr. Vincent Chang. Thank you, Chairman. So these 3 classes of registered persons will be involved in auditing the flags. So how many of these professionals do we have in Hong Kong? Is the scope wide enough? We have 110,000 SDUs waiting for recognition. So each professional will have to audit roughly 30,000 flags. So do we have enough manpower, and will the fees be costly? For example, the Building Bright operation, it has been launched for many years. So the cost for building works recognition is very costly because there is a time limit and there is limited supply of professionals. Ms. Wong? So the 3 classes of professionals are professional architects, engineers, and surveyors. According to our initial proposals, we have considered the total number of these professionals in Hong Kong, that's 7,000. After consulting the industries, we think we need to expand the scope. So we have added the two subclasses, that is fire or structural discipline, under the professional engineer class for recognition of BHU. So the number of professionals eligible for this task has increased from 7,000 to 8,000. Since there will be a 4-year transitional period, we think there will be sufficient professionals in the markets. Mr. Tony Jay. Now, I said that the implementation timetable should be flexible. So registration is allowed up and until 2027. So why don't we have the same extent of flexibility here? Any professionals that the Secretary for Housing deems fit should be allowed to do this work. Now, according to the resolution in relation to a CAP 25 fire safety ordinance, registered fire safety engineers. So if they are allowed to register as engineers, would that give us more flexibility to the BHU regime? Would the Secretary for Housing allows more and more qualified persons to become specified professionals? Now, concerning registered fire safety engineers, now in item 2 of the Schedule 3, professional engineers under Engineers Registration Ordinance CAP 409, it already includes engineers under the disciplines of building, building services, civil, fire, or structural. So we have heard members' views whether we can expand the scope further. Now, we have heard from the industry during the consultation exercise that there are some technical grade engineers who may be able to help. So we think at this moment that we should limit the scope to the disciplines mentioned in the schedule. But we know that engineers or professionals do not necessarily need to visit the flags themselves to draft a report. According to Ms. Doreen Kong, the professionals may send representatives to check the flags, and then the audit or the confirmation would be signed off by the professionals themselves. Mr. Vincent Zhang, thank you. So I am pleased to hear that, but 8,000 professionals in Hong Kong, the pool is not that large. So part of the 8,000 strong professionals have never been engaged in the business. So are you sure that there will be sufficient professionals to do the work? And is there room for expanding the scope? It's just box ticking. And after all, we are talking about 110,000 SDUs. We don't want the fees to be raised because of the lack of manpower. Now, I will extend the meeting by 10 minutes, pending an answer from Ms. Wong, and also we will set a time for the meeting next week. Now, 8,000 professionals. We have been communicating with the professional bodies, and we will see what the suggestions is. Now, we have 3 types of professionals under Schedule 3. The law already provides flexibility to the Secretary for amending the schedule in the future. So after the launch of the regime on the 1st of March 2030, if there are other classes of professionals who are also able to perform the task, we will consider the situation and have the secretary make adjustments to the schedule on a negative vetting basis. Of course, we will consult electrical members first before we do that. Mr. Andrew Lam, just a follow-up. Mr. Tony Chen mentioned the registered engineers for fire safety. Well, actually, that piece of legislation allows the other professionals, for example, surveyors and others, to become fire safety professionals. And also, as I've mentioned, cost control is important. Realistically speaking, if there are so many types of professionals involved in the sign-off process, the cost will be very high. In fact, registered contractors have sufficient professional judgments to take forward the work. So I hope we can revisit the requirements in the future. Thank you. So I think we will stop here. We have completed scrutinizing Schedule 3. Now, as a matter of fact, I've invited the Secretariat to send the available time slots for meeting next week to members. So members have been notified that on next Monday, there will be 2 meetings, 8:30 to 10:30 and 10:45 to 12:45. But as you may know, we may be affected by a typhoon. So if there is a typhoon on Monday, then the 2 meetings on Monday will be deferred because I anticipate some traffic issues on that day. That's fine for electrical members, but electrical staff members and Secretariat staff will have to arrive even earlier before us. So if the meetings will be deferred, I will notify you in due course. So let's say if the 2 meetings on Monday cannot be held, I propose to reschedule those meetings to 8:30 on Wednesday, from 8:30 to 10:30 a.m. Is that agreed? Any questions? If that's the case, then the Secretariat will notify you of the arrangements by way of email in a moment's time. And also on the 25th, there will be 2 sessions of meeting as well. So that's all the arrangements. There is no AOB. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.